She was treated like a criminal for sitting in a seat she paid for, but when security arrived, they had no idea they were about to face one of the most powerful women in aviation. What happened next didn't just change one flight. It changed an entire airline forever. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Reagan National Airport, casting golden streaks across the polished floors. Travelers shuffled through security lines, dragging suitcases and balancing coffee cups, their faces a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. Among them was Dr. Amara Lawson, a woman whose calm presence seemed to carry its own quiet gravity. She wore a tailored navy blazer over a crisp white blouse, her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her carry-on rolled smoothly beside her as she made her way toward Gate 23. There was nothing flashy about her appearance, nothing that demanded attention. But there was something in the way she walked, steady, composed, unbothered by the chaos around her, that suggested she was used to being in control. Amara had just finished a 3-day conference in Washington, where she'd delivered the keynote speech on aviation safety protocols to a room full of industry leaders. It had gone well. Better than well. She'd received standing applause and multiple requests for follow-up consultations. Now, all she wanted was to get home to Atlanta, kick off her heels, and spend the evening with her daughter. She checked her boarding pass on her phone. First class. Seat 2A, she'd upgraded herself as a small reward after a long week. She deserved it. The gate area was crowded, filled with business travelers tapping away on laptops and families wrangling restless children. Amara found a seat near the window and pulled out her tablet, reviewing notes from the conference. She was so absorbed in her work that she barely noticed when the boarding announcement crackled over the intercom. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will now begin boarding Flight 617 to Atlanta. We invite our first-class passengers and those needing additional assistance to board at this time. Amara stood, smoothed her blazer, and joined the line. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, a young woman with blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail. The agent scanned it without looking up. Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Enjoy your flight. Amara stepped onto the jet bridge, the familiar hum of the plane's engines growing louder as she approached the cabin door. A flight attendant stood just inside, greeting passengers with a practiced smile. Her name tag read Jessica. Welcome aboard, Jessica said brightly, glancing at Amara's boarding pass. Her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, so brief that most people wouldn't have noticed. But Amara noticed. Seat 2A, Amara said evenly, meeting her eyes. Jessica's gaze flicked from the boarding pass to Amara's face, then back again. Right this way. Amara walked down the narrow aisle, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She reached her seat, a wide leather chair by the window, and placed her bag in the overhead compartment. She settled in, fastening her seatbelt and pulling out her tablet again. Around her, other first-class passengers boarded. A man in a gray suit took the seat across the aisle. An older woman with pearls and a Chanel bag sat 2 rows ahead. No one paid Amara any attention. She preferred it that way. But as she glanced up, she saw Jessica standing near the galley, whispering to another flight attendant, a tall man with slick back hair. Both of them were looking in her direction. Amara's stomach tightened. She'd seen that look before. She knew what it meant. She took a slow breath and turned her attention back to her tablet, willing herself to stay calm. Maybe she was imagining it. Maybe it was nothing. But deep down, she knew better. The question hung in the air like the hum of the engines. What were they about to do? Jessica approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She stopped beside Amara's seat, folding her hands in front of her like she was about to deliver bad news. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice saccharine. "May I see your boarding pass again?" Amara looked up, her expression calm but wary. "Is there a problem?" "Just a routine check," Jessica replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. Amara handed over her phone, the digital boarding pass glowing on the screen. Jessica studied it for a long moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I see. Seat 2A. She paused. "And you're sure this is your seat?" The question landed like a slap. Amara's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "Yes. I'm sure." Jessica tilted her head, her smile never wavering. "It's just that, well, there's been some confusion. Sometimes passengers accidentally board with the wrong ticket, or they're seated in the wrong section. I just want to make sure everything's in order." The implication was clear. Amara didn't belong here. Around them, other passengers were starting to notice. The man in the gray suit glanced over. The woman with the Chanel bag turned slightly in her seat. Amara felt the weight of their stares. "There's no confusion," Amara said quietly. "This is my seat. I purchased a first-class ticket." Jessica's smile tightened. "I understand, ma'am. But he'll need to verify this with the gate agent. If you could just step into the galley for a moment." "No." The word came out firm, but not loud. Amara didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Jessica blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. "Ma'am, I'm just trying to, I'm not moving," Amara said, her gaze unwavering. "This is my seat. I have every right to be here." Jessica's smile vanished. She straightened, her expression hardening. "Ma'am, if you're going to be difficult, you'll have no choice but to call security." The cabin went silent. Even the hum of the engine seemed to fade into the background. Amara felt her heart pounding, but she kept her face calm. She'd been here before, not on a plane, but in boardrooms and conferences and places where people looked at her and saw only her skin color, not her credentials. She'd learned long ago not to let them see her anger. Not to give them the satisfaction. "Call security," Amara said quietly. "I'll wait." Jessica's eyes flashed. She turned on her heel and strode toward the front of the cabin, pulling out her phone. Within moments, she was speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The man across the aisle leaned toward Amara. "Is everything okay?" Amara gave him a small, tired smile. "It will be." But even as she said it, she felt the familiar weight of humiliation settling over her. She'd done nothing wrong. She'd followed every rule, paid for her seat, boarded her flight like any other passenger. And yet here she was, being treated like a criminal. The minutes ticked by. Other passengers continued to board, squeezing past the commotion with curious glances. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked away, uncomfortable. Then, heavy footsteps echoed down the jet bridge. 2 airport security officers appeared in the doorway, their uniforms crisp, their expressions stern. Jessica met them at the entrance, gesturing toward Amara. "That's her," Jessica said, her voice low but audible. "She's refusing to cooperate." The officers exchanged a glance, then walked down the aisle toward Amara's seat. "Ma'am," the first officer said, his hand resting on his belt. "We're going to need you to come with us." Amara looked up at them, her heart racing but her face serene. "On what grounds?" "There's been a complaint," the officer said. "We need to verify your ticket and identification." "My ticket is valid," Amara said calmly. "And I've already shown it to the flight attendant." "Even so, ma'am," the second officer said, his tone more gentle. "We need you to step off the plane so we can sort this out." Amara felt the eyes of every passenger on her. She could see the judgment, the discomfort, the silent questions. Was this really happening? Amara's hands trembled slightly as she unbuckled her seatbelt. She folded them in her lap, pressing them together to stop the shaking. She would not let them see her fear. She would not let them see her break. Am I being removed from this flight? She asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. The first officer hesitated. We just need to verify. Am I being removed? Amara repeated, louder this time. The cabin was dead silent. Every passenger was watching now. Some had their phones out, recording. The officer shifted his weight. Ma'am, if you cooperate, this will go much faster. Amara stood slowly, gathering her tablet and her purse. She met Jessica's eyes as she stepped into the aisle. The flight attendant looked smug, satisfied. But Amara didn't say a word. She simply walked. The officers flanked her as she moved down the aisle, past the rows of staring passengers, past the gate agent who'd smiled at her just minutes before. She kept her head high, her steps measured. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. As she stepped off the plane and onto the jet bridge, the cooler air hit her like a wave. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. One of the officers gestured toward a small room near the gate. If you could just wait in here, ma'am. Amara walked inside. The room was sterile, windowless, with a single table and 2 chairs. She sat down, placing her purse on the table in front of her. The officers stood by the door. One of them was already on his radio, speaking in low tones. The other looked uncomfortable, avoiding her gaze. Amara closed her eyes and took another breath. She thought of her daughter, Maya, waiting for her at home. She thought of the years she had spent building her career, earning her doctorate, climbing the ranks to become one of the most respected aviation safety consultants in the country. She thought of all the times she had been underestimated, overlooked, dismissed. And she thought of the power she held, power that Jessica and these officers had no idea existed. She opened her purse and pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a moment. Then, with quiet determination, she began to type. The message was brief, professional, but it carried the weight of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. I've been removed from Flight 617 under false pretenses. Discriminatory treatment confirmed. Recommend immediate investigation and grounding of aircraft pending review. She hit send. The message went to her direct contact at the Federal Aviation Administration, a woman she had worked with for years, someone who trusted her judgment implicitly. Within seconds, her phone buzzed with a reply. Understood. Initiating protocol now. Amara set her phone down and leaned back in her chair. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply waited. Because she knew what was about to happen. And it was going to change everything. How much power could one woman really have? The minutes dragged on in that small, sterile room. The officers occasionally murmured into their radios, but no one spoke to Amara directly. She sat quietly, her hands folded on the table, her expression unreadable. Then, suddenly, the door burst open. A man in a dark suit strode in, his face flushed, his eyes wide with alarm. His badge identified him as Marcus Green, the airport's operations manager. Behind him was the gate agent who'd scanned Amara's boarding pass earlier, looking pale and anxious. Dr. Lawson, Marcus said, his voice breathless. I am so sorry. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Amara looked at him calmly. Has there? Marcus glanced at the officers, then back at Amara. We've just received word from the FAA. Your credentials have been verified, and he paused, swallowing hard. And we've been instructed to ground all flights pending an immediate safety review. Amara raised an eyebrow. All flights? 47 aircraft, Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. Across the entire terminal. The FAA wants a full investigation into operational protocols and staff conduct before any plane is cleared for takeoff. The officers exchanged stunned glances. The gate agent looked like she might faint. Amara let the silence stretch for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice calm and deliberate. I assume you've informed the crew of Flight 617? Marcus nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. The captain has been briefed. The entire crew is being questioned. And the flight attendant who made the complaint? Marcus hesitated. She's being removed from duty pending a formal inquiry. Amara stood slowly, smoothing her blazer. Good. Marcus stepped forward, his hands clasped together almost pleadingly. Dr. Lawson, please. I know this has been an incredibly distressing experience. On behalf of the airline and this airport, I want to offer you our sincerest apologies. What happened to you was unacceptable. Amara looked at him for a long moment. She could see the fear in his eyes, fear of lawsuits, of bad publicity, of consequences he couldn't control. But she also saw something else. She saw the realization dawning on him, on the officers, on everyone in that room. They had misjudged her. Badly. I don't want apologies, Amara said quietly. I want accountability. Marcus nodded frantically. Of course. Absolutely. We'll conduct a full review. We'll implement new training protocols. This will never happen again. See that it doesn't, Amara said. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Marcus followed her, still apologizing, still scrambling to make things right. But Amara wasn't listening anymore. She walked back through the terminal, past the grounded gates, past the confused passengers demanding answers. She didn't look back. What would happen when the truth finally came to light? Amara sat in the airport lounge, a glass of water in front of her, watching the chaos unfold on the terminal monitors. Flight delays scrolled across the screens. Passengers crowded the gate counters, their voices rising in frustration. Airline staff rushed back and forth, trying to manage the fallout. 47 planes. Grounded. Because of her. She could have let it end there. She could have walked away, boarded another flight, let the airline suffer the consequences of their discrimination. She had every right to. But as she sat there, watching the faces of stranded travelers, families with young children, elderly couples, business professionals, she felt something shift inside her. These people hadn't wronged her. They were just caught in the crossfire. Her phone buzzed. It was her FAA contact. Amara, we can lift the grounding order if you confirm the immediate safety concerns have been addressed. Your call. Amara stared at the message. She thought of Jessica, smug and dismissive. She thought of the officers, so quick to assume she was in the wrong. She thought of every time she had been treated as less than, simply because of the color of her skin. But she also thought of the passengers on Flight 617 who'd looked at her with sympathy. The man had asked if she was okay. The people who'd recorded the incident, who'd seen the injustice. She thought of her daughter, and what she would want Maya to learn from this moment. Amara began typing. Recommend lifting grounding order on all flights except 617. Require mandatory bias training for all staff involved before reinstatement. I want a formal, public apology from the airline, and I want policy changes implemented immediately. She paused, then added one more line. And I want to speak to Jessica. The response came quickly. Understood. Arranging now. 20 minutes later, Amara was escorted to a private conference room. Marcus Green was there, along with a representative from the airline's corporate office. And sitting across the table, looking small and frightened, was Jessica. The flight attendant's eyes were red-rimmed. Her earlier confidence had evaporated. She looked up as Amara entered, and her face crumpled. "Dr. Lawson," Jessica whispered. I'm so sorry." Amara sat down across from her. She didn't speak right away. She let the silence sit between them, heavy and uncomfortable. "Do you know who I am?" Amara asked finally. Jessica shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I'm the lead aviation safety consultant for the Federal Aviation Administration," Amara said quietly. "I write the protocols that keep passengers safe. I train the people who train flight crews. I've spent 20 years in this industry, working my way up from the ground, earning every credential, every certification, every ounce of respect." Jessica's shoulders shook with sobs. "And you saw me," Amara continued, her voice steady but not cruel, "and you decided I didn't belong. You didn't see my ticket. You didn't see my credentials. You saw my skin, and you made a judgment." "I'm so sorry," Jessica choked out. "I don't know what I was thinking. I was wrong. I was so wrong." Amara leaned forward. "Why did you do it?" Jessica looked up, her face streaked with tears. I don't know. I saw you sitting there, and I assumed." She trailed off, unable to finish. "You assumed I didn't belong," Amara said. Jessica nodded miserably. Amara sat back. She could feel the anger still simmering inside her. But she also felt something else, something unexpected. Pity. "You're going to lose your job," Amara said. "You know that, don't you?" Jessica nodded, fresh tears spilling over. Amara was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I'm not going to ask them to fire you." Jessica's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "But," Amara continued, "you're going to do something for me. You're going to take bias training. Real training, not just a video you click through. You're going to learn why what you did was wrong. And you're going to spend the next year working with organizations that combat discrimination in the airline industry. You're going to hear stories from people who've been treated the way you treated me. And you're going to become better." Jessica stared at her, unable to speak. "Can you do that?" Amara asked. Jessica nodded frantically. Yes. Yes, I can. I will. I promise." Amara stood. "Good. Because the next time you see someone who doesn't look like you, I want you to see them. Really see them. Not their skin. Not your assumptions. Them." She turned to Marcus and the corporate representative. "Make it happen." Then she walked out of the room, leaving Jessica sobbing behind her. Could compassion really change a heart? The news spread through the airport like wildfire. Within hours, the story had leaked to the media. Passengers who'd recorded the incident posted their videos online. The footage showed Amara being escorted off the plane, calm and dignified, while Jessica looked on with barely concealed satisfaction. The comments section exploded with outrage. But then, something unexpected happened. A second wave of stories began to emerge. Passengers from Flight 617 came forward to defend Amara, describing her grace under pressure. Aviation industry colleagues shared testimonials about her character and expertise. The FAA released a statement confirming her credentials and commending her professionalism. And then Amara's own statement was published. She didn't attack Jessica. She didn't call for her firing. Instead, she called for systemic change. She called for accountability, for training, for a future where no one else would be humiliated the way she had been. The response was overwhelming. Marcus Green stood in his office, staring at his computer screen as article after article praised Amara's compassion. He'd expected lawsuits, public relations disasters, corporate chaos. Instead, he was witnessing something he had never seen before, a moment of genuine transformation. He picked up his phone and called the airline CEO. "We need to do more," Marcus said. "Dr. Lawson gave us a chance to make this right. We can't waste it." Within days, the airline announced a comprehensive overhaul of its training programs. Mandatory bias training for all employees. An independent review board to investigate discrimination complaints. Partnerships with civil rights organizations to ensure accountability. And a public apology, not a corporate statement, but a real, heartfelt acknowledgement of what had happened to Amara. Jessica watched all of this from her apartment, her phone buzzing constantly with messages from friends and family. She had been suspended, just as Amara had predicted. But she hadn't been fired. She read Amara's statement over and over again, tears streaming down her face. She had expected anger. She had expected punishment. She had deserved it. But Amara had given her something else, a chance. Jessica enrolled in the first available bias training program. She reached out to organizations that worked with marginalized communities. She began volunteering at a local nonprofit that helped refugees navigate American systems. And slowly, painfully, she began to understand. She began to see the world through different eyes. She heard stories from people who'd been profiled, dismissed, humiliated. She learned about the countless tiny indignities that people of color faced every single day, indignities she had never noticed, never questioned. And she realized something that shook her to her core: she had been part of the problem. One evening, weeks after the incident, Jessica sat in a training session led by a black woman who'd spent 30 years in the airline industry. The woman shared her own stories of discrimination, of being passed over for promotions, of being questioned about her credentials, of being treated as less than. Jessica listened, and she wept. After the session, she approached the woman. "I did that," Jessica said, her voice breaking. "I did exactly what you described. I treated someone like she didn't belong, just because of how she looked." The woman looked at her with kind, knowing eyes. "What are you going to do about it?" Jessica took a shaky breath. "I'm going to be better. I have to be." The woman nodded. "Then you will be." Could one moment of grace really ripple out and change so many lives? 3 months later, Amara stood at a podium in a conference center in Chicago, addressing a room full of airline executives, flight crews, and industry leaders. The conference was titled Building Equity in Aviation, and she had been invited as the keynote speaker. She spoke about her experience, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She talked about the systemic issues that allowed discrimination to flourish. She talked about the importance of accountability and compassion working together. And she talked about Jessica. "The woman who called security on me made a terrible mistake," Amara said, her voice steady. "But I chose not to destroy her life because of it. I chose to give her a chance to learn, to grow, to become better. Because punishment alone doesn't change hearts. Education does. Empathy does." The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. "We can't build a better industry by tearing people down," Amara continued. "We build it by lifting each other up. By holding each other accountable, yes, but also by believing that people can change." After her speech, Amara stepped off the stage to thunderous applause. People lined up to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her their own stories. And at the back of the room, standing quietly near the exit, was Jessica. Amara saw her and stopped. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the crowded space. Then Amara walked toward her. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "Dr. Lawson, I didn't know if I should come. But I wanted you to know that I've been doing the work. I've been learning. And am so grateful for the chance you gave me. Amara studied her for a long moment. She could see the change in Jessica's eyes, the humility, the genuine remorse, the determination to do better. How has it been? Amara asked gently. Hard, Jessica admitted. But necessary. I've learned so much. About myself, about the world, about the harm I've caused without even realizing it. She paused. I'll never be able to fully make up for what I did to you. But I'm going to spend the rest of my career trying. Amara nodded slowly. That's all any of us can do. Try to be better than we were yesterday. Jessica wiped her eyes. Thank you. For not giving up on me. Amara reached out and gently touched Jessica's arm. We all deserve a chance to grow. Don't waste yours. I want, Jessica promised. As Amara walked away, she felt something lift from her shoulders, a weight she hadn't realized she had been carrying. The anger, the hurt, the humiliation, it was still there, a scar that would never fully fade. But it no longer controlled her. She had chosen forgiveness. Not because Jessica deserved it, but because she, Amara, deserved peace. That evening, Amara sat in her hotel room, video calling her daughter. Maya's face filled the screen, bright and curious. Mom, everyone at school is talking about you, Maya said, her voice filled with pride. They say you're a hero. Amara smiled softly. I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I just did what was right. But you could have been really mean to that lady, Maya said. You could have gotten her fired. Why didn't you? Amara thought carefully about her answer. Because being right isn't enough. We have to be kind, too. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Maya nodded, absorbing this. I want to be like you when I grow up. Amara's heart swelled. You already are, baby. You already are. As she ended the call, Amara looked out the window at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, Jessica was probably doing the same, looking out at the world and seeing it differently than she had before. And somewhere, on 47 different flights, passengers were traveling safely, unaware of the woman who'd fought not just for her own dignity, but for a system that valued everyone equally. What does it truly mean to forgive? A year later, Amara received an invitation to speak at the airline's annual safety conference. She almost declined. The memory of that day still stung, even after all this time. But something made her say yes. When she arrived at the conference, she was greeted with respect and admiration. The airline had implemented every change she had recommended. Bias incidents had dropped by 70%. Employee training programs were now considered the gold standard in the industry. And Jessica was there. She was leading a workshop on recognizing and confronting implicit bias. Amara slipped into the back of the room to watch. Jessica spoke with quiet conviction, sharing her own story without sparing herself. She talked about her assumptions, her prejudice, her failure to see Amara as a human being. And she talked about the grace she had been shown, grace she hadn't deserved, but that had changed her life. Dr. Lawson could have ended my career, Jessica said, her voice thick with emotion. She had every right to. But instead, she gave me a mirror. She made me look at myself and see the person I'd become. And then she gave me a choice, stay that person, or become someone better. She paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. I chose better. And every day, I choose it again. Because that's what her compassion taught me. That we're not defined by our worst moments. We're defined by what we do after them. The room was silent. Then, slowly, people began to applaud. After the workshop, Jessica saw Amara and walked over, her expression nervous but hopeful. Dr. Lawson. I didn't know you were here. I wanted to see how you were doing, Amara said simply. Jessica smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm doing the work. Every day. I can see that, Amara said. And she meant it. They stood there for a moment, two women whose lives had collided in the worst possible way, and who had somehow found a path forward. "Thank you," Jessica whispered, "for believing I could be better." Amara nodded. "Keep proving me right." As Amara walked out of the conference center that day, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain, the humiliation, the anger. But also the choice she had made, the choice to respond with dignity, to demand justice without seeking vengeance, to extend grace even when it wasn't deserved. She thought about the 47 planes that had been grounded that day, and the thousands of passengers who had been inconvenienced. She thought about the policies that had changed, the lives that had been touched, the hearts that had been opened. And she realized something profound: power isn't just about what you can destroy. It's about what you can build. Shed had the power to ruin Jessica's life, to humiliate the airline, to make them all pay for their prejudice. But she had chosen a different kind of power, the power to transform. Because in the end, the strongest hearts aren't the ones that strike back. They're the ones that choose to heal. The ones that believe in redemption, even when it seems impossible. The ones that understand that grace isn't weakness, it's the bravest thing a person can offer. Amara drove home that evening, the sun setting behind her, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. She thought of her daughter, and the world she was fighting to create for her, a world where people were judged by their character, not their color. A world where mistakes could be learning opportunities. A world where compassion and accountability walked hand in hand. It wasn't a perfect world. It never would be. But it was better than it had been. And that was enough. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is choose forgiveness when we have every right to choose revenge. Sometimes, the greatest strength lies not in how hard we can strike, but in how gracefully we can extend a hand to someone who's fallen. Because changing one heart can change a family. Changing a family can change a community. And changing a community can change the world. Amara had been humiliated, profiled, and removed from a plane for no reason other than the color of her skin. She could have let that moment define her with bitterness. Instead, she let it define her with grace. And in doing so, she didn't just ground 47 planes. She lifted thousands of hearts. The END sometimes, the strongest hearts are those that forgive when they had every reason to fight back. True power isn't measured by the damage we can inflict, but by the healing we choose to create. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of the Unbroken Grace Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers all around the world.